After my business took a nosedive, my wife brazenly began an affair with an older, wealthy man and announced she was leaving me because I'm a worthless husband. But when our son showed up at her lover's house to share some unfortunate news, she suddenly started acting like the victim. I've been married to my wife, Josephine, for the past 23 years. I met Josephine when we were in college. She was my mate's sister, and we would always hang out with each other. Initially, there was no attraction between us, but as we got to know each other, we gradually fell in love. Josephine's outgoing, extroverted nature captivated me, and those traits remained some of the things I loved most about her. By the time we both graduated from college, our relationship had become quite serious. I thought the next logical step would be to move in together and eventually get married. However, Josephine had other plans. She told me she was going to take a year off to travel around the world. Josephine had always talked about visiting various places before it was too late and even had a travel vision board in her room while growing up, so I wasn't completely surprised when she brought this up. Since I had already secured a very good job and didn't want to give it up to travel, we discussed the situation, and Josephine understood she would have to travel alone if that was what she wanted. So, while I leased and moved into a small but affordable apartment to live on my own, Josephine prepared to travel to various countries. She didn't come from a wealthy family, so all her expenses would come from her savings accumulated after years of working part-time as a cashier in a restaurant. Despite having a student loan, just like me, she prioritized her dream to travel above all else and knew that she would have to make do with the money she had saved. On the day she was leaving, it was bittersweet seeing her off at the airport. Josephine promised to text me when she landed at her first destination. Initially, things between us seemed smooth. Josephine would text me every day about the various places she was visiting, the food she was eating. From her pictures, she looked excited and content, and I was genuinely happy that my girlfriend was living out her dream. In turn, I would tell her about my day at the office and the work I accomplished. I know it might sound boring to some, but I preferred my 9-to-5 job at that time and thought I could never trade it for anything. Josephine would listen to my stories and constantly tell me how I was missing out on life by being stuck within my office walls while she sat at a beautiful cafe or a tropical beach. She would talk about how society was boring and that people needed to just travel more and relax. However, as days passed, her enthusiasm started to wane. She began facing problems while traveling. Her wallet was stolen in the hostel, her noisy roommates disrupted her sleep, and she grew weary of traveling by bus in the intense heat of Asian countries, which she found difficult to cope with. She would constantly ask me to lend her money so she could either have a meal or book a ticket to another place. She tried to find a job here and there, but without a proper work visa, it was difficult for her. She also befriended other travelers like her, and initially, they seemed to have fun as a group, staying out all night partying. She would send me pictures of their adventures. However, as time passed, she began to tell me that some people in the group were unnecessarily difficult, and they would sometimes get into fights. In those moments, I would tell Josephine that she could always book a flight back home and come live with me. I reminded her that she had been traveling for months and needed to rest for a while, although she never really took my suggestion. One time, she called me in the middle of the night, crying. She told me that she missed home too much and was ready to come back. She had no money to book a flight, so I booked it for her without hesitation. I was just excited that my girlfriend, whom I hadn't seen for so long, was coming back to me. When I went to pick up Josephine from the airport, I was nervous. Long-distance relationships are not easy, but I was glad we had gotten through those difficult days so seamlessly. However, imagine my shock when I saw her coming out of the airport with a huge mark on her face, looking like someone had punched her. She was wearing glasses to cover up her eyes. Josephine ran up to hug me, but I looked at her with concern. When I gently asked what had happened, she brushed off my question and started to kiss me. She also looked like she had lost a lot of weight, which is typical when you have been constantly traveling for the past few months. During the drive back home, I asked her again about what had happened to her face. It was concerning to think that someone had possibly harmed her. Josephine tried to dodge my questions, which only made me more concerned. However, I decided to give her some space, hoping that she would open up on her own. When we reached my place, my girlfriend was surprised to see how well kept my home was. She expressed how much she missed sleeping in a comfortable bed and taking a hot shower. I allowed her time to freshen up while I took care of her laundry, as she had a lot of dirty clothes that needed cleaning. After she finished freshening up, we sat down to have dinner together. I had prepared her favorite food, chicken lasagna, and brought her favorite drink from the store, knowing how much she would appreciate it. As she sat down to eat, she smiled and thanked me for everything. I eagerly started telling her about all the plans I had made for us for the weekend. I was excited to show her around the city and take us to some amazing restaurants. Suddenly, I noticed Josephine had stopped eating. Concerned, I asked her if everything was okay and noticed tears rolling down her cheeks. I quickly got out of my seat and went over to her, asking what was wrong. This is when Josephine burst into tears and hugged me tightly. I held on to her, feeling terrified and worried about what might have happened to her. Eventually, she started telling me about how she had seriously messed up. I remained silent as Josephine explained that she never meant for it to happen, but it did. I looked at her in confusion and asked her what she meant and if the mark on her face had anything to do with it. Josephine nodded, guilt etched all over her face. She took a deep breath and started telling me about how she had become close to a guy from her travel group, someone she was hanging out with every day. My heart skipped a beat as my girlfriend continued to explain how this guy was just like her, free-spirited, fun, funny. She didn't even know how or when she developed a crush on him, but when she realized it, she felt immensely guilty. The guy also had a girlfriend, so Josephine knew better than to meddle in their relationship. However, on that fateful night she called me, she and the rest of the group got quite drunk. Somehow, she and the guy ended up in an alley, and he kissed her. Josephine looked down at the floor and confessed that she liked it and didn't stop him. However, his girlfriend found them and started yelling and screaming. The situation escalated, and the girlfriend punched Josephine straight in the face. Embarrassed and upset, Josephine decided to cut her trip short and come back to me. I sat there feeling numb as my girlfriend expressed how she felt like she was losing her mind back then and didn't know what she was doing. She told me that now that she was back with me, she felt immensely guilty for having cheated on me and knew she had to confess. After Josephine confessed to me, I felt a mix of shock, hurt, and betrayal. It was like a heavy weight settled in my chest, making it hard for me to breathe. I struggled to comprehend how the person I loved could have betrayed my trust like this. When Josephine called me crying, I didn't hesitate to book a flight for her, but now she was admitting to cheating on me with some random guy. It felt surreal, like an out-of-body experience. The weight of her confession hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt nauseous. I ran to the washroom, overwhelmed with emotions. Josephine followed me, apologizing repeatedly. She kept expressing how sorry she was and how she wished she could undo it all. Unable to bear being in the same room as her, I grabbed my coat and walked out, needing space to process everything. No matter how much I thought about it, I just didn't know what to do. On one hand, my girlfriend had cheated on me and admitted to enjoying kissing the other guy. On the other hand, we had a long history together, and this was the first time such a betrayal had occurred. When she shared her travel plans with me, I never doubted her once because I knew her character well. What she had done was completely out of character. Later that night, when I returned home, she was asleep on my bed, looking like she had been crying. I didn't wake her. Instead, I spent the whole night tossing and turning, grappling with what to do next. The next morning, I sat her down and presented her with two options. We could either end our relationship immediately and part ways, or we could try to move forward together, but she would need to put in a serious effort to mend what she had broken. I expressed my deep disappointment but also my willingness to work through it if she was committed as well. Josephine hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face, and expressed her gratitude for the chance I was giving her. She promised me that she would never repeat such a mistake again. I didn't stop there. I also informed her that she needed to find a job and start repaying me, even if it was a small amount each month. She needed to reimburse me for all the expenses I had covered during her trip. Her eyes widened slightly as I explained that I had paid for all her expenses out of goodwill, but she had betrayed my trust by cheating on me. If we were to move forward and start afresh, it was only fair that she repay every cent she had taken from me for her travel expenses. Josephine agreed, although it was clear she wasn't entirely on board. Over the following months, Josephine and I lived together while she worked hard to find employment. After an extensive search, she accepted a job as a personal assistant with a minimal salary. While she had hoped for more, I reminded her that she lacked corporate work experience, so starting small was necessary. I reassured her that with time and experience, her salary would increase. Each time she received her salary, Josephine made sure to pay me back some of what she owed and also worked on repaying her education loan. We agreed to split the rent based on our salaries, so she contributed her share as well, while I covered the larger portion of the expenses. I was fine with it as long as I saw her actively fulfilling her responsibilities. Slowly but surely, we worked together to repair our relationship, and I started trusting her again. I fell back in love with her smile and laughter. We met each other's families, and our bond grew stronger. Eventually, we discussed taking the next step and getting married. While Josephine envisioned a traditional wedding, I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars on an event. Instead, I proposed that we use the money for an extravagant honeymoon covering several countries. Josephine loved the idea, as we had never traveled together internationally before. After a small ceremony with our close friends and family, we embarked on an adventure together. Traveling with my wife was an absolute joy. We spent blissful days lounging on the beach, sipping mocktails. Each morning felt like a slice of paradise. It was a well-deserved holiday for me, as I rarely took breaks from work. We returned home rejuvenated, with fresh minds and renewed energy to dive back into our work. After our trip, I had an epiphany about the importance of finally pursuing my long-standing dream of starting my own business. I had always harbored this ambition but was afraid of failing. However, traveling made me see how important having time and freedom is, which pushed me to finally go for it. I discussed this with my wife, and we both agreed that it was the right time for me to take a risk, leave my job, and dive into entrepreneurship. While she was a bit concerned about the initial loss of my regular salary, I assured her that once I had set up my company, it would eventually lead to greater financial rewards and the flexibility to travel more together. I even mentioned that if everything went well, she might not need to keep her job. In the end, Josephine was convinced, and I submitted my resignation letter at my job, ready to embark on this new chapter of our lives. Over the years, I worked tirelessly to build my business. It wasn't a smooth journey, but I managed to stand on my own feet successfully. With the business thriving, I was able to fulfill my promise to my wife and buy a beautiful beach house that she adored. As planned, she could leave her job since my income from the business was more than enough to support us. During this time, we were blessed with a baby boy named Sam. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me. When Sam was born, I decided to take a break from work so I could stay at home and take care of him. Thankfully, my business was able to run smoothly with the help of my staff, which gave me the freedom to spend time with our newborn son guilt-free. Sam and I have always been close, he's my little buddy, and my wife even jokes that we are like two peas in a pod. We spent countless hours playing, laughing, and learning together. Seeing Sam grow up into a kind-hearted, curious young boy has been the greatest joy of my life. Over the years, Sam has always expressed his desire to work with me someday. Hence, after my son turned 16, he started to intern at my company every summer. I taught him everything he needed to know from the ground up because the plan was for him to eventually take over the business, allowing me to finally retire. Everything in our lives was going smoothly until last year when I accidentally discovered that my wife had been taking antidepressants. I found her pills hidden in the cabinet in the bathroom, and when I asked her about it, she became defensive and told me to mind my own business. However, I was concerned and gently reassured her that she could talk to me about anything. After much back and forth, my wife finally admitted that she had been feeling bored and depressed in our marriage lately. I was surprised because we had been going on regular date nights for years and taking 3 vacations annually to places she chose. We lived in a spacious home with a chef and a personal trainer at her disposal, while I dedicated my day and night to work on my business. She spent her days playing tennis or socializing with friends at the gym. I had provided her with everything she could ask for and even more. What else could anyone ask for? I wanted my wife to be happy, so I asked her if something specific was troubling her. She denied that there was anything in particular and mentioned that she had been secretly attending therapy sessions to work through her issues. I hugged her and reassured her that there was no shame in seeking help and that she could always talk to me freely. This is when my wife added that both she and her therapist felt that there was a lack of excitement in our marriage. Confused, I asked her what she meant, and my wife then went on to tell me that perhaps we needed to introduce some mystery into our lives by considering an open relationship. I was taken aback by her suggestion, as I had not anticipated her saying something this ridiculous. I asked her how having an open relationship would solve our issues, and she explained that she felt stuck and wanted to add some excitement to her life. I shook my head as I realized that this had always been an issue with my wife. She had a tendency to entertain impractical ideas in her head and got bored of things quite quickly. I was surprised that her therapist would even consider such a suggestion without a full understanding of our relationship dynamics. There was no way I could agree to an open relationship, and I made my stance clear to my wife. I told her that if she truly wanted an open relationship, then we would need to get a divorce because I couldn't stay married to someone who wanted to date other people. My wife looked offended and upset, immediately backtracking and insisting that it was just a suggestion and I didn't need to mention divorce. I told her that I had fulfilled all the promises I made to her, and if she kept asking for more, there was nothing more I could offer. I encouraged her to find meaning in her life and to appreciate the good things we had. She nodded in understanding, and that was the last time the topic was brought up. We continued to have our weekly date nights, and my wife never mentioned the open relationship suggestion again. She continued taking her antidepressants as advised by her therapist, and I was always there to listen and support her through her feelings. I hoped that with time, she would find a sense of contentment and happiness. Unfortunately, this year brought more challenges for us. After COVID, we had already experienced a significant loss of customers, and our business had been slowing down over the past 2 years. Then we faced another major setback when we had to close our second largest branch, resulting in a substantial loss for us. I've always been transparent with my family about my business, so when I informed my wife and son about the branch closure, they were understandably upset. While my son asked me about our plan moving forward, my wife became anxious about future financial losses. I tried to assure her that facing setbacks was a normal part of running a business and we had more than enough money saved up to cover our losses. She argued back that we needed to cut our losses and sell the business. This was something she'd been bringing up for a few years whenever we faced tough times. I understood her worry, but as any business person knows, we often have to deal with challenges to see better days. I believe our business could recover with time. Since this is our main source of income, I did not want to give up so easily. I tried talking to my wife about it, but she got mad, telling me how I never take her feelings into account. I tried to reassure her that I could handle everything, but she scoffed at me. She said she was getting really tired of hearing me say that and went on to imply that perhaps I should have just stuck to my 9-to-5 job since clearly, I wasn't cut out to be a businessman. Her words really hurt. I couldn't believe she'd say that, especially considering everything I've done for our family with the money I earned from my business. Our argument escalated into a major fight, and my wife declared that she was done with being married to a loser like me. She hurled hurtful words like deadbeat and good for nothing before packing some of her things and announcing her intention to leave our relationship. I was completely shocked by her behavior and couldn't understand why a simple discussion about my business had escalated to such an extreme level. My son attempted to calm her down, but she put him in a difficult spot by asking if he wanted to go with her or stay with me since she no longer wanted anything to do with me. Sam started to cry, clearly torn, while I tried to reason with my wife and understand why she was acting this way. In the end, my son refused to leave with his mom, and we watched as my wife drove away. Looking back, those days were incredibly confusing for us as we couldn't comprehend why or how Josephine had decided to leave us. My wife had been my best friend all my life, and I couldn't understand where I had gone wrong. My son assured me that perhaps this was just temporary and she might eventually return. However, over the days, Josephine refused to pick up our calls, and we had no communication with her whatsoever. I couldn't stay in bed feeling depressed, so I returned to work to focus on redeeming my business. Foolishly, I believed that fixing my business might also mend my relationship with my wife. Yesterday, my wife reached out to me after a month of no contact. She asked me if Sam and I could meet with her for dinner since she had something to share with both of us. I had a feeling our marriage was over, which only made it more painful for me to meet with her. Nevertheless, I agreed to meet with her that evening. Long story short, over dinner, she explained to us how unhappy she had been in the marriage with me and that the past month away from us had solidified her decision to seek a divorce. Sam seemed taken aback, but I had a feeling this was coming, so I stayed quiet, trying to process it all. My wife continued saying that she was moving out and taking her things. I asked if she found a new place, and she smiled, saying she didn't need one because she was moving in with her boyfriend. I was shocked and confused, feeling a mix of hurt and disbelief at her words. Josephine then explained that over the last month, she had met and unexpectedly fallen in love with an older man. They had apparently instantly clicked, and their attraction was undeniable. She said she didn't want to delay living her life with him and being happy, hence they decided to start living together. Josephine mentioned that since my business was struggling, she didn't even want any alimony from me. She just wanted a peaceful, quick divorce so that she could move on. She assured me that she had given this a lot of thought and did not want me to persuade her otherwise. Despite my disappointment and hurt, I agreed to the divorce. Sam, unlike me, looked angry and began yelling at my wife for abandoning the family. My wife defended herself, saying she had done her best but couldn't force herself to stay. She offered Sam the option to live with her and her boyfriend, but he angrily refused, telling her that he was not going to abandon the family as she did. Tearfully, I looked at my son as he squeezed my hand and told my wife that he would choose me over her any day. We didn't stay to talk with her after that and quickly left. Since that lunch, I've noticed that my son has been unusually quiet, and I even caught him crying in the washroom once. It breaks my heart to see him go through this, and I haven't even taken the time to process my own feelings. I want to scream and cry for the way my wife has betrayed me. I can't believe she's asking for a peaceful divorce as if I'm the one leaving her. Am I the a-hole for wanting to fight with my wife for what she's putting my son through? Update 1. I am glad I posted on Reddit because all of your comments and suggestions helped me calm myself down and think straight. You're right, I shouldn't engage with my wife. If she doesn't want alimony and wants to leave without a fight, I should let her go. It's like the trash taking itself out. I've talked to my son and convinced him to start going to therapy. Hopefully, he can heal from the sadness he's feeling. Update 2. It's been 5 months since I last updated. The last time I opened Reddit, I updated you all about my wife leaving me and how my son and I were trying to cope with the news. However, today I come bearing better news. My wife and I have finalized our divorce. True to her word, she did not take a penny from me as alimony. From the start, my lawyer had advised me that if my wife ever changed her mind during the divorce and asked for anything, I should fight her tooth and nail since she was the one who walked out on us and cheated on me, so I would have the upper hand. I'm just glad it did not come down to that. If you think she did it out of the goodness of her heart, you're wrong. I found out from a mutual friend that her boyfriend is actually a married older Saudi man who is very possessive of her. He insisted she not take anything from me because he doesn't want her to live with another man's money. Additionally, she's trying to convince him to marry her and doesn't want to appear like a gold digger by taking half of my assets. Whatever the case, I'm just glad to be done with her. During our court meetings, she would try to catch my eye or apologize, but I ignored her every time. Sam has cut her out of his life and wants nothing to do with her. He continues to go to therapy and has learned to come to terms with our divorce. As for my business, it has improved slightly, and I am confident that I can get it back on track without Josephine pulling me down. I believe I can finally give my 100% to the company and take it to newer heights. Update 3. Today I discovered that my son had visited his mom. I didn't even know he had wanted to see her in the first place, but what really surprised me wasn't their meeting. It was that he went to her place to meet her boyfriend and spill all the beans about her. Josephine called me in tears, obviously distressed and angrily accusing me of orchestrating this whole thing. She claimed Sam had embarrassed her and insinuated that I was trying to take revenge on her. I was bewildered because I had no clue what she was referring to. Later, when Sam returned home, I asked him to explain his actions. It turns out he wanted closure and to teach his mom a lesson. He reached out to her, claiming he wanted to meet, which excited her as she thought he had forgiven her. She arranged for him to meet both her and her boyfriend. Seeing her partner made Sam even more upset, so during lunch, he told the boyfriend everything about how his mom had walked out on us and cheated on me. Although I'm sure the boyfriend already knew these things, it must have been quite a scene to hear Sam describe the pain we both went through. Sam already knew his mother had cheated on me once before we got married, as we had discussed it during one of his therapy sessions, so he told the boyfriend about that too, claiming that my ex would likely cheat on him as well. I can imagine how much Josephine must be upset, especially considering she's likely aiming to secure her future with this wealthy man. When I asked my son if he felt any relief after confronting his mother, he nodded and mentioned that he had always wanted to share these things with her but never had the opportunity before as he could not express himself properly. This is why I chose not to punish my son. Instead, I messaged Josephine, assuring her that while I would ensure my son didn't contact her again, I felt like he had not done anything wrong. I made it clear that I didn't know he would do this, but that I was proud he spoke his truth in front of her and let out his frustration. If her partner's perception of her changed after learning the truth, it only highlighted how poorly she treated us in the past. She hasn't replied back to me yet, but I believe she doesn't have much ground to stand on either. For now, I'm going to focus on making sure that Sam is okay. Stay tuned for more stories on Reddit Hours.